Welcome to HFY Codex. If you love epic sci-fi stories where humanity shines, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for thrilling HFY adventures. Join us and be part of the journey. The auction room was cold and full of smoke, the smell of metal and oil hanging in the air like poison. Bright lights burned down on the auction stage, making the cages below look even darker. Each cage had once held a living being Lan. Slaves brought in from lost wars or captured worlds, but now every cage stood empty except one. Inside that final cage sat a girl with silver skin and glowing violet eyes. Her wrists were chained, her back marked with old wounds, but her eyes were not afraid. They watched the room with silent anger, silent strength. She was not broken like the others had been. She was waiting. No one had bid on her all day. The auctioneer had shouted until his throat grew dry. Called her exotic, dangerous, rare, but the rich buyers in the crowd only laughed. They didn't want danger, they wanted obedience. She didn't bow, she didn't cry. So they passed her by. The crowd had started to thin out now. Nobles and traders from across the galaxy filed toward the exit. Their new slaves dragged behind them, collars clicking, chains rattling. The auctioneer wiped his forehead with a dirty cloth, sighed, then turned to the last cage with fake cheer. Final chance, he called, voice cracking, this one still breathing. Still untouched, who wants to tame the wild one, eh? Open bid low as you like, but the crowd barely looked up. The girl in the cage didn't even flinch. She just sat there, still and proud like a queen in a cell. Then came the sound of boots, slow and firm, echoing down the corridor from the entrance. The auctioneer paused, frowning. A figure stepped into the light. Tall, wearing a long brown coat, face hidden under a hood. The man moved with calm, his hands behind his back. He stopped before the last cage and said nothing for a while. Just looked at her. The girl's gaze met his, silent fire passing between them. He didn't see a slave in chains. He saw someone who refused to break, and that made something in him pause. The auctioneer forced a tired smile. You interested, friend? She's not cheap, but I'll take anything at this point. Name your price. The man didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the girl. She sat like a statue, like she had stopped breathing. A long silence filled the hall. Most of the remaining crowd turned to look, whispering, wondering who this stranger was, why he cared about the one everyone else ignored. The auctioneer tapped his foot, growing impatient. Well, then the man took one slow step closer and finally spoke, his voice low and steady. I'll take her. The words cut through the air like a blade, quiet but sharp. The girl's eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but something else, something like confusion. The auctioneer blinked. You'll take her. Did you not hear the bidding rules? The man reached into his coat, pulled out a small silver disc, tossed it onto the table without a word. It lit up with credits far more than the starting price. No one said anything for a long moment. Then, the auctioneer laughed. Well, generous and quiet. That's rare these days. He snapped his fingers. Release her, quickly now, before he changes his mind. Guards moved in, keys in hand, but kept their weapons ready. The chains clattered to the ground. The girl stood slowly, her knees stiff but her spine straight. She looked at the human again, studying him, trying to guess what he wanted from her, but his face gave nothing away. Under the hood, he turned and walked away without looking back. And to her surprise, no one pulled her by the arm or shouted orders. The guards just stepped aside. The auctioneer nodded toward the open path. She hesitated, then followed. The crowd watched in silence as the silver-skinned girl walked beside. The human, free from chains, no collar around her neck, only the sound of their steps echoed through the hall. Whispers followed them like shadows. Outside, the sky was red and gray. Clouds hung like broken sails. Wind brushed past her face. 4. The first time in weeks, she looked at the man, his pace calm, his silence steady. Finally, she asked, "Why did you buy me?" He didn't stop walking, didn't look at her, but his answer was clear. "I didn't buy you." He said, "I freed you." She blinked at the words, unsure how to reply. No one had said that to her before, not in her whole life. Behind them, the auction house doors slammed shut, and with it, the life she once knew ended. The human didn't ask for thanks, didn't explain his reason. He just kept walking, and for some strange reason, she kept following. The silent road rain began to fall as they walked through the rusted city. The metal streets echoed under their boots. Tall, broken towers stood like bones around them. The girl walked beside the human in silence, her bare feet touching cold steel, but she didn't complain. She had expected pain, expected him to command her like the others had, but he said nothing, gave no order, offered no chain. He simply walked, slow and steady, as if her freedom was not a gift, but something natural, something already hers. His coat flapped behind him as wind swept across the empty roads. She wrapped her arms around her own body, unsure if it was the cold or the strangeness of the moment that made her shiver. No one had touched her. No one had struck her. It felt unreal. They stopped near an old cargo shelter. Half buried in rubble and scrap, he stepped inside and checked the walls. It wasn't a home, not even a proper room. It's just a shell to keep the storm out. He turned to her and pointed toward the dry corner. "You can rest there," he said quietly, then turned away and sat near the broken door. Keeping watch as the wind howled, the girl looked at the corner, then at him. Waiting for the command that never came, she sat down slowly, still tense. The silence stretched for minutes, maybe hours, only broken by the tapping rain on steel. She finally asked, "What are you?" Her voice was soft but sharp, the kind that had once made guards flinch. But the man didn't even look at her. "A traveler," he said simply, as if that answered everything. She narrowed her eyes. "Travelers don't buy slaves," she said, her voice more steady now, but he only shrugged. "I didn't buy a slave. I took back something that shouldn't be in a cage." She stared at him, trying to understand. His words made no sense in her world. In her world, everything had a price. Kindness was weakness, and freedom was a dream only fools believed in. Yet here he was, not treating her like property, not even like a burden. She watched him for a long time, the way he stayed alert, always listening to the wind, the way his hands rested near the strange weapon on his belt, the way his back stayed straight even when sitting. He wasn't a normal man, not even for a human. "Who are you, really?" She asked again, voice sharper this time. "You talk like a soldier, but walk like a ghost." This time he glanced at her, and for the first time, she saw his eyes, green, tired, full of something older than war. "I used to fight," he said. "Now I try not to." Then he looked away again, as if the answer hurt to speak. She leaned back against the wall, eyes still on him. "So why me?" she asked. "Why pick me when everyone else walked away?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out a small metal flask and sipped it. Then finally said, "Because you didn't break." The words hit her like a sudden wind, making her chest tighten. She had heard many things in cages, but never that. "I didn't have a choice," she replied after a while. "Breaking means dying." He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "But surviving without becoming like them, that's rare." She turned her face to the wall, hiding the strange warmth rising in her throat. Night came quietly. Shadows growing longer, stars hidden behind thick clouds. The man stood and checked the perimeter again, calm but careful, always scanning for danger. The girl watched him move like a soldier, but one who had no army anymore. When he returned, she was still awake. "If you don't want to be followed, you shouldn't carry so many credits," she said. Testing him, he gave a small smile. "They were stolen," he said, "from someone who sells." "People like you," she blinked at that. "You steal from slavers?" she asked, curious now. He nodded. "Only the worst ones," he said. "I don't save everyone. I can't. But sometimes, just sometimes, I find someone worth saving." Her heart beat faster at those words, though she didn't understand why. "You don't know me," she said coldly. "You don't know what I've done." He didn't look away this time. "I don't need to," he said. "I saw the fire in your eyes. That's enough." She looked down at her hands, at the scars on her wrists, unsure how to respond. Sleep came slowly. Her body curled near the wall. But her mind, full of questions. The wind outside had calmed, but her thoughts did not. What kind of man risked himself for a stranger? What kind of man saw value in someone left behind? The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was the silhouette of the human near the doorway, standing like a silent shield, unmoving, guarding her like she mattered. And for the first time in years, she slept without fear. The price of her name asterisk when she opened her eyes. Light spilled in through the broken ceiling, warm and golden. For a moment, she forgot where she was. No chains, no guards, just quiet breath and the smell of wet metal. Her fingers flexed against the ground, testing if it was real. The man was already awake, crouched near a rusted power box, fixing something with wires and old tools. His coat hung on a broken pipe nearby. The steam from a small heater danced in the air. She watched him without speaking. Unsure of what she was now, he glanced back at her once, gave a small nod, then returned to his work. No words, no commands, just silence. The kind that didn't feel heavy or dangerous. It felt like space given freely, something she'd never canoes, something she'd never known before. She sat up slowly, muscles sore but whole. Her voice broke the quiet. "You haven't asked my name," she said, not knowing why it bothered her. Maybe it was because the slavers never cared. To them, she was a number, a price tag, not a person. The man looked up, wiped grease from his fingers, then met her gaze. "That's yours to give, not mine to take," he said simply. She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever put it that way before. Names had always been stripped or branded. She hesitated, the words stuck in her throat, not from fear but from weight. A name was more than sound. It was a memory, a wound, a piece of a past buried under pain. Still, something inside her whispered to answer. "Saren," she said at last, the name falling like stone into water. Soft but deep. The man gave her a nod, like it mattered, like it meant something. "Saren," he repeated once, not mocking it, not testing it, just holding it gently. "And you?" she asked, surprised at her own boldness. The man gave a short smile. "Rhett," he said. "That's what I go by now." The way he said it made her wonder what name he had left behind, what story he was not telling. She stood and crossed the room, slowly, still keeping distance, still unsure. "Where are we going?" she asked. Rhett looked outside, scanning the horizon through a cracked visor. "There's a port for miles east," he said. "Off-world transports dock there weekly." Her eyes narrowed. "You're taking me to another buyer?" she asked, voice sharp, defensive, ready to fight. He didn't react, just leaned back against the wall and shook his head. "No buyers," he said, "just options. If you want them?" The idea stunned her more than a slap. Options. Choices. She had been born in chains, raised in cages. The only choices she'd known were obey or suffer. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Truly asking this time, not accusing, just confused. Rhett didn't speak right away. He opened a metal case. near the wall and pulled out a folded data pad, powered it on, then turned it toward her. Images flickered other cages. Other auctions, other faces like hers, trapped and scared. Because this isn't rare, he said softly, because they're still selling people out there, and too many just watch. She stared at the screen, her chest tight. She knew this truth. Lived it, but hearing it from him made it heavier somehow. He shut the pad and tucked it away. Then handed her a canteen. Water not drugged, not filthy, just clean water. She took it and drank slowly, eyes still locked on his. You said, I'm not a slave anymore, she said. Then, what am I now? He didn't answer right away, just looked at her carefully. That's your question to answer, not mine, he said. But if you want to find out, I won't stop you. The words felt like a door opening where only walls had stood before. She didn't speak again for a while, just sat beside the heater, letting the warmth sink into her bones. Her mind raced with things she didn't know how to feel. Fear, hope, confusion, even something close to trust. Outside, distant thunder rolled across the sky. The port city waited beyond the horizon. Smoke rising in lazy columns, Rhett began packing supplies, calm and quiet. Never rushing, always careful, always ready. Do you know how to fight? He asked suddenly, not looking at her. She blinked, surprised by the question. Yes, she answered. They taught me in the pits, and I survived. He nodded like he expected that answer. Then bring this, he said, tossing her a stun blade from his bag. She caught it without thinking, fingers wrapping around the hilt like it belonged there. She stared at it, then at him. You trust me with a weapon? Rhett shrugged. If I didn't, I wouldn't have unchained you, he said. She looked down at the blade, then stood and strapped it to her side. The weight felt right, not as a prisoner, but as something else entirely. Together, they stepped. Outside, wind rushing against them, rain fading into mist. The city loomed ahead, filled with watchers. Buyers, monsters, and maybe others like her, waiting in cages still unopened. But now, she wasn't behind bars anymore. She had a name, a blade, and a choice. And beside her walked a human who treated her not like a prize, but like a person. And that alone had already changed everything. Eyes in the crowd, the port city was alive, not with music or joy, but with smoke, shouting, and the sharp scent of sweat and fuel. Ships landed in loud bursts. Traders barked prices in over 20 languages, and broken souls moved between crates like shadows. Saren stayed close to Rhett, her eyes scanning everything, every movement, every hand that lingered too long on a weapon. Her steps were careful, measured, like a panther walking through fire. No chains on her now, but old instincts still held tight. Rhett walked ahead, calm but not careless. His coat moved with the wind. His hand never strayed far from the sidearm clipped at his hip. This was not a place for kindness, not a place for second chances, and they both knew it. Stay sharp, he said quietly as they passed a crowd of armored guards. She nodded once, silent, her hand resting near the stun blade he gave her, and when their eyes met for a brief second, she saw the warning in his face. It wasn't just a city. It was a hunt. They moved past a weapons dealer, then through a hallway of food stalls, and deeper into the alleys behind the docking bays. There, in the rusted corners of the city, lived those who didn't belong anywhere else. Exiles, ex-slaves, broken soldiers, and bounty hounds. A hooded man leaned against a metal wall, watching them. He chewed a data chip between his teeth and didn't blink when they passed. Sarah noticed the symbol tattooed on his wrist, 2 rings crossed by a blade. A slaver mark. We're being followed, she said softly, without turning her head. Rhett didn't reply, but adjusted his walk, changed pace. Then took a narrow side path between 2 market halls. They passed a window filled with alien dolls and dirty water tanks. Saren stepped carefully, eyes always flicking to the edges. Rooftops, windows, shadows. This place stank of power and danger. And now that she walked as a free being, she felt more exposed than ever. Not because she was weak, but because she mattered. At the end of the alley stood a door with flickering lights above it. Rhett knocked 3 times, paused, then twice more. It opened slowly, revealing a thick alien woman with 4 arms and a scar down her lip. She scowled until she saw him. "You should be dead," she said in a growl. Rhett gave a small smile. "Maybe later," he replied. She let them in without another word. The door locked behind them with a hiss. The air inside was cleaner, warm, and buzzing with old machines. "This is Mara," Rhett said to Saren, an old ally. "She owes me 3 favors and still hasn't paid the second." Mara snorted and tossed him a metal disc. "You bring problems into my den, Rhett?" she asked, looking at Saren with sharp eyes. "Not a problem." He said, "She's with me." Mara grunted and went to a corner console. "You've got 1 hour before the patrols sweep this block. If they catch her here, they'll burn this place." Down with you inside it, Saren watched the exchange quietly, while Rhett worked with Mara. Saren sat in a corner, staring at the wall of screens filled with faces, some marked red, some green, some blinking yellow. Her own face wasn't there. But she saw many like hers, eyes hollow, collar still tight. A sound behind her made her turn fast, stun blade half drawn. But it was only a small girl with blue skin and white eyes, peeking from behind a stack of crates. The girl looked at Saren with wide-eyed curiosity, not fear, and that stunned her more than any blade. "You're not like them," the girl said in a whisper. "You walk different." Saren blinked, caught off guard. "How do I walk?" she asked. The girl tilted her head. "Like you're looking for something you already lost." Then she vanished behind the crates again. Before Saren could follow, Rhett called her over. "Come see this," he said. Pointing at a screen, it showed one of the patrol guards from earlier. But now, he was speaking with a traitor and the traitor was describing her. Down to the scar under her eye. "They're tracking you," Rhett said, his voice calm but firm. "We need to move soon," Mara frowned. "You'll draw heat to everyone here." Rhett nodded. "That's why we leave in 15 minutes. Saren stepped forward, eyes burning. "Let me help," she said. "Don't protect me if it puts others in danger." Rhett looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. He handed her a datapad, filled with access routes, sewer maps, and supply drops. She studied it quickly. "We'll head east through the vent lines," he said. "Split at the junction, regroup by the launch platforms." She memorized every detail, then looked once more at the little girl hiding nearby, wondering if she would survive this place. As they slipped out the back door, into smoke and thunder, Saren didn't feel like prey anymore. She was hunted, yes, but not helpless. And next to her walked the only man who had ever called her by name without chains around her neck. Hunted, not helpless. Steam poured from broken pipes as Saren and Rhett slid into the lower vent lines. The tunnel was narrow, damp, and smelled like rusted blood. Only the faint red glow of emergency lights showed them the path ahead. There, shadows long and flickering behind them. The noise of the city faded into a dull hum above. Here in the underbelly, voices carried like ghosts through the ducts. Every clang or echo felt too loud, too risky. Saren moved low and fast, her senses sharp like a blade in water. They had split from Mara's safe house just minutes ago. The heat was already closing in. Patrol drones swarmed the upper alleys, and bounty pings had been sent to every licensed hunter in the district. Her face was no longer unknown, was worth money now. "Left turn," Rhett whispered, pointing toward a graded path that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Saren didn't question him. She trusted his timing now. Not because he spoke like a leader, but because he never treated her like less than one as they moved deeper. The walls changed. Graffiti turned to warning signs, and warning signs gave way to bones. Broken cuffs and deep scoring in the metal. Floor where claws had once dragged something away. Siren paused only a moment before stepping forward. "Where are we now?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Rhett didn't turn around, just kept walking. "Old feeding tunnels from the war days," he said. "No patrols come down here. Not because it's safe, but because they're scared." That should have made her hesitate, but it didn't. She had lived with worse than fear. She had slept beside corpses and been sold to men who thought her silence meant weakness. Fear didn't stop her now, sharpened her steps. They moved for another mile before. Reaching a sealed blast door, Rhett tapped a code on a rusted panel, then looked at her once we passed through. "We're in the outer loading fields," he said. "If they find us there, they'll shoot first and lie later. Then we don't give them a chance." She replied, checking the charge on her stun blade. Rhett smiled, not with joy, but with understanding. Like she had just said something he already believed. The door hissed open slowly, and moonlight poured through. Cold and blue across the platform ahead, massive crates sat in rows. Covered in dust, behind them were ships, small and dirty. But capable of reaching orbit, they crept forward, staying low behind a rusted hauler above them. A drone buzzed through the dark, scanning for life signatures. Rhett reached into his pack and pulled out 2 thermal cloaks, tossing one to her. She wrapped it around herself tightly. The moment they crossed into the field, the alarms began, not from them, but from another corner of the docks. A fire burst in the distance, followed by shouting and the crack of plasma rounds. Rhett cursed under his breath. They flushed other fugitives too. Saren watched as 2 guards dragged a group of frightened aliens toward a holding cage. One of them, a young boy, tried to run and was slammed down hard by a metal rod. Her jaw clenched, every part of her burned to strike. "Don't," Rhett said firmly. Reading her face, "We help them later. But if we fall here, no one gets out." She didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched. Remembering how that pain felt, how it made you smaller with every hit. But she held her ground. They kept moving, weaving between crates until they reached a shipment bay marked for outbound cargo. A small freighter hummed quietly on standby. Rhett moved toward the hatch but froze mid-step, his hand raised. Then pointed toward the right. 2 bounty hunters stood near the boarding ramp. One was reptilian with glowing red goggles. The other wore armor made from slave chains. Saren recognized that look, men who made a living off broken things. Men who enjoyed the break. She stepped beside Rhett, blade drawn low. "We can't sneak past," she said quietly. "And if we run, we lead them to more people." Rhett nodded slowly, then handed her a small smoke charge. "Then we don't run," he said. "We distract and strike fast." She smiled. Not because she wanted to fight, but because she had been waiting her whole life to strike on her own terms. They moved like wind. The charge rolled into the open with a soft hiss. Smoke bloomed white and thick. Then chaos began. Saren darted forward as Rhett covered her. Her blade found the hunter in chains first, slashing under his arm before he could aim. He roared in pain, then fell with a heavy thud. The second spun toward Herb. A blast from Rhett's pistol took him in the shoulder. More guards were coming. Footsteps pounded from every side. Alarms screamed across the landing bay. But Siren and Rhett were already inside the ship, slamming the hatch shut behind them. Locking bolts whirred into place as the engines roared to life. Rhett took the pilot's seat while Saren watched the monitors. "They're trying to jam the launch codes," she said, hands flying over the controls. "Override with manual lockout," Rhett replied. "Burn the engine before they shut the bay." Outside, armed units swarmed toward them. Too late, the ship lifted with a violent tremble. Fire kicking from its thrusters, and in seconds they were tearing into the sky, leaving the port and its hunters behind. As the clouds broke and stars returned to view, Saren sank into the co-pilot seat, covered in sweat and grit, but her hands were steady, her heart beat fast but proud. Not with escape, but with fight. Not with fear, but with purpose. The echoes we carry. She belongs to no one. The twin moons of Carey's prime hung low in the sky, casting a silver glow across the rocky ground. The ship had landed in a quiet valley far from the main cities, its hull cooled by night air and its lights dimmed. For silence, Saren stood on the ridge above the camp, watching smoke rise from a small village far in the distance. Her fingers rested near her weapon, but not for fear. Tonight wasn't about escape. It was about answers, about the sister who might still be out there. Rhett joined her quietly, not asking questions, just standing beside her, both of them looking toward the horizon like it might speak first. Finally, Saren broke the silence. "I keep thinking this is a trick, that I'll wake up back in the cage." He looked at her carefully, then said, "The cage was real, but so is this." She nodded slowly, trying to believe it, trying to accept that freedom didn't have to hurt, that not everyone who helped her wanted something in return. The path to the village was long and uneven, filled with crumbling stone and quiet wildlife. They traveled in silence, keeping low, moving through shadows, until the lights of the settlement flickered into view like fireflies against dark wood. It was a rough place, built by survivors and runaways, homes made from crash metal and broken transports. There were no flags, no guards, just people, alien and human, living in the scraps of peace they built with their own hands. A woman greeted them at the edge, old and gray-skinned, her eyes sharp as knives. "Names?" she asked, her voice flat. Rhett gave his, then nodded to Saren, who stepped forward and answered without hesitation. "Saren," she said, "and I'm looking for my sister." The name Vesa passed between them like a prayer. The old woman frowned, then pointed toward a structure near the far edge. "She came through here 2 years ago," she said. She didn't speak much, but she helped rebuild the waterline. Strong girl. Quiet eyes. Saren's heart beat faster, her breath shallow. She thanked the woman and walked quickly across the camp, past curious glances and quiet whispers. Her legs moved faster than her thoughts, hope building and crashing like waves inside her chest. The door to the shelter creaked open, and there, standing beside a row of fuel cells, was a young woman with short white hair and a burned scar over her brow. Her back was turned, but Saren knew, even before she spoke. She knew. "Vesa," she said, and the woman froze, turned slowly, her eyes wide, and in them was a storm of memory, pain, and something like disbelief. They stared at each other for one breath, then another. Then both moved at once. The hug wasn't gentle, it was desperate, crushing, shaking. Years of lost time collapsed into that moment. No words came, only the sound of breath and the tight grip of arms refusing to let go again. Behind them, Rhett waited outside, not intruding, not speaking, just watching as a reunion unfolded that he had risked everything to make possible. For once, he allowed himself to believe that some wounds might actually close later. Inside a small firelit room, Vesa and Saren sat side by side, sharing food that tasted like ash and honey. Vesa told her how she escaped, how she ran through forests and hid under dead ships, how she joined this camp when she couldn't run anymore. Saren told her everything, to the cage, the auction, the human who whispered, "I'll take her," not as a claim, but as a promise. Vesa listened, her hand never letting go of her sister's. And when she looked at Rhett across the fire, she didn't see a stranger, she saw family in the morning. Saren stood alone again on the ridge, the valley stretching far into pale blue mist. But this time, she wasn't watching for danger. she was listening to the quiet, to the truth that now lived inside her skin. She belonged to no one, not to slavers, not to fear, not to the pain they carved into her past. Her story didn't begin in chains, and it wouldn't end in silence. It was hers now, and no one would take it from her again. When Rhett came to stand beside her, she looked at him and smiled. "You found me in a cage," she said. "But you never tried to own me." He shrugged. "You didn't need saving," he said. "You just needed someone to see that you were still fighting." She nodded once, then turned toward the path back down. "There are others still out there," she said, "others still trapped, still waiting." Rhett followed her. "Then let's go," he said. "Let's break the next cage together." And as they walked down the mountain, side by side, under the rising light of a world that had once forgotten her, Sarah knew this truth deep in her bones. Freedom was not something given. It was something taken back, one step at a time.